how would you handle it if you were financially retired today, but woke up tomorrow to find yourself literally homeless? This is the brutal reality that Tony Yazbeck lived through in Lebanon. He didn't lose all of his wealth in a bad trade. He lost it to a corrupt banking system that went bankrupt overnight. In this conversation, Tony explains why the West is following the same unsustainable path of infinite money printing and why Bitcoin is the only exit from this failing legacy system. He reveals why most people are NPCs that are going to stay stuck in this rigged game and why you should stop looking at Bitcoin as just another investment. This is a high signal conversation and I really enjoyed it, and I hope that you do too. All right, let's dive in. Tony Yazbeck, welcome back to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Bram, very happy to see you, man. How you been?
Yeah, really good. And I'm happy you're back. You were one of my earlier guests. So for the people that haven't seen that episode, just search for Tony's name on my YouTube and you'll see our previous conversation, which I thought was really insightful. And also that time when we spoke, we kind of walked through your very brutal, I would say, orange pill story and the awakening you had when you lived in Lebanon, right? And you realized that the money system in your country, where you went from being very wealthy to basically having nothing, right? We know all these stories of people in Lebanon robbing banks, not to get other people's money, but to actually get their own money. That is what you lived through, and what kind of started your journey. And I wanted to refer back to a talk you gave in Bitcoin Prague, where you called Bitcoin a middle finger to the world's financial betrayal. And I thought that was really nice, and kind of wanted to start with, can you kind of describe Bitcoin, or do you describe Bitcoin more as an act of defiance than just a better form of money or digital gold, or however people want to define it right now?
Wow, this is a very, very powerful question, man, because its answers are a bit of everything. Bitcoin is, depending on the lens that you view it as, is definitely, a middle finger to the legacy system. It's a message. It's that somebody's drawing the line in the sand. Is like, all right, your BS, your corruption, your theft, your whatever it is that you've been doing for so long, it ends now. That is essentially the message that I hear when I read about Bitcoin and I finally understood what it's about. Now, of course, it's also, the best form of money humanity has ever seen. And it's also the first form of money that is not government or central bank issued. Again, something we've never seen. And of course, it also comes from the world of tech, something, again, we have never seen before, right? So there's a lot of newness to Bitcoin, which is why so many people to this day have such a hard time understanding it, right? And at some point they all will. How fast and how painful that learning process is really depends on how much work you do. My role here, ever since I discovered Bitcoin, and it literally saved my life in my case, is to really educate and to push out a message of awareness, a message of truth, hopefully to counter the false narratives and the psyops that are very strong but are very out there, which is why so many people to this day misunderstand Bitcoin, and why so many people right now are so depressed about Bitcoin. Very, very foolish state to be. There's nothing to be depressed about. It's actually quite the opposite. But that level of conviction and that conclusion can only come from someone who understands what it is that, you're looking at. And so this is why this question is like a never-ending rabbit hole, and we can speak for months about this. But of course, we'll try to be very specific during this conversation.
What do you think is the one thing that people are totally missing about, the purpose of central banking, fiat money? What is maybe the biggest red pill that you want or give to people actively? What is the one thing that they really need to understand?
Well, the thing is, unfortunately, to really get to the level of understanding and conviction that I'm at right now, You have to live the life that I've lived. You have to walk in my shoes. You have to get completely obliterated. You have to taste violence and homelessness and poverty and stress and anxiety and depression and crazy dark thoughts for 9 months to really understand why I have the level of conviction that I have. Because all of this is really encapsulates the world that we've been lied to, since the day we were born. The money that we work for before Bitcoin is not money. It's you're working for a surveillance, apparatus. It's a system that was built to steal from you, to control you, and to surveil you. But it was done in such a, I don't want to compliment them, but really it was done in a very brilliant way where most people never felt that this was actually what was going on. And like every Ponzi, in its infancy, it still works, right? Because it's still fresh. It's only when it gets to the end, to its expiration date, where the abuse has gone so far past the point of no return, where you start seeing the cracks and everything falling apart, which is the stage that we're at now. And so this was my awakening. Like, I was so angry because of what happened to me that I was in such desperate need to find answers. And eventually that desperation led me to these answers, and I found out the truth. And that truth made me even more angry, because now I can point to a who is behind the reason of my collapse, right? So the monetary system is created by a group of, call them whatever you want. I like to call them parasites, right? And that group is essentially what controls everybody's money. But this group is the worst kind of human being you can ever describe. They are behind the wars. They are behind the genocides. They are behind the pedophilia that we've recently been reading about. They are behind the most extreme kinds of human, evilness that you can possibly imagine. This is the system that is fueling all of this, right? But when you're living in countries where you're not immediately visualizing all of this, it's like so abstract to you that it's like, this guy must be on drugs, right? But that is the reality of the fiat system. And fortunately for us, it's gotten to a point where their abuse, their inefficiency, their moronic decisions over many decades have led to a point where their mothership now is collapsing. Money printing is not sustainable. Interest rates are unpayable. The country, the world reserve currency right now is bankrupt. The US government is officially bankrupt. It's been that way for many years. They've been able to kick the can with whatever, number wizardry that they've been doing. But that lifespan is becoming shorter and shorter because you are seeing the pain on the streets now. Right? People can't afford anything. People walk into the supermarket, they got a heart attack. They even contemplate the thought of buying a house, they get an even bigger heart attack. And it's like, why am I even here? Type of attitude. Like, why do I even bother doing anything when it's a lose-lose scenario, right? So people need to understand that this is the cause of any misery, especially economic misery, that they're going through. And before they have a cemented belief in all of this, nothing will change, right? So I think this is really what's missing in the space today, and why people like myself don't view the world in the same way from that lens anymore, because we have been brutally forced to fast forward into the truth, right? And then once you understand that, everything changes.
When it comes to holding Bitcoin securely, peace of mind starts with architecture. OnRamp's multi-institution custody model distributes control access across 3 independent regulated key holders in a 2 of 3 multi-sig quorum. No single point of failure, no pooled or omnibus exposure, just segregated client-titled vaults. You retain full legal ownership while OnRamp coordinates security, compliance, and operational workflows behind the scenes. Multi-institution custody is the foundation for everything that OnRamp builds. Sound infrastructure that distributes counterparty risk and provides fault-tolerant resilience with clear audits and institutional controls. And now OnRamp is piloting flat, predictable pricing to make best-in-class Bitcoin custody and financial products more accessible than ever. Visit onrampbitcoin.com to learn more and sign up with code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. OnRamp, strength in many, simplicity in one. Some people would say, like everything that you just said, that's alarmist. Like you said, it's grand thinking. You must be on drugs. This sounds so bad that it's probably not happening to me, right? I think I've also shared, and that's why I think also you're a great guest to talk to, right? Like as someone who grew up in a Western country, money just works, right? And I have water and food, and I have a home and safety and school, all that stuff that you think, that we know is important to us. So there's never really there wasn't really a reason for me to start doubting the money, basically. And I think that's also kind of what you are alluding to, right? When people react in this, alarmist, crazy, whatever, don't put that stuff near me kind of way. But why do you think that those people are actually the ones that are being irrational, right? Is it because they trust the status quo, basically, or they don't? Maybe they don't even see what the status quo is that they agree to, and what kind of powers they gave away, etc. Like how would you describe or illustrate that? How could we help people see that don't have your point of view of actually going from a lot of money to nothing in one day? I mean, that obviously wakes you up, but a lot of people won't experience that in their lives.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I mean, human beings, first of all, are very allergic to change, especially if it's drastic change. They get comfortable with what they know. They set up a routine and they pretty much stick to it without much change. And you have that small percentage of the world that really goes out of their comfort zone always to excel. That's why you have such a drastic difference between the echelon of really successful people and then the majority are what they call the NPCs, the non-player characters that they just exist. Not much value, not much contribution. They just go about there, they do what they're told, they go left, go right, they go right. Not much critical thinking, right? They're given enough comfort so that they don't have to question anything, beyond that. And that keeps them as the perfect candidates in a system that was created, for that control and surveillance. And so as long as that comfort exists, well, these people it's highly doubtful that they're going to question anything. But what we're starting to see now is that for the first time ever, there was a competitor to that system that was born in 2008, right? Bitcoin, that incorruptible, unconfiscatable, unstoppable idea whose time has come. And unfortunately for the legacy system, this idea is now money, right? So ever since 2009, that entire fiat legacy system became optional to those who understood what just arrived. That new sheriff in town that no one can stop, no matter what they want, no matter how many times they try, and believe me, they've tried. So when you have a force like Bitcoin out in the wild that you cannot contain, what do? You try to fight the element that you can control, which is the narrative about Bitcoin. You try to make it look like the bad thing. Oh, this is money for terrorists and criminals and, all that other nonsense. And you try to shift people's perception of the tool that was created to set them free so that in their minds, it's the one thing they should avoid at all costs, right? And this is unfortunately where most people still are, because they believe the nonsense, the mainstream, the lies, and all that stuff. But there's a shift, there's like a change in the air, because the economic situations of these very same people is deteriorating. That is the silver lining here, right? I mean, the legacy system, to sustain itself, has to continuously engage in more debt, money printing, and money printing to fund whatever nonsense that they want. And so what that does is that it's completely destroying the purchasing power of these NPCs. So they were always told, follow the rules. They always did. Well, now They can't afford much anymore. So now their lives are becoming a bit miserable. But despite all of this, you still have a large majority that shrinks their lifestyle to fit that reduced capacity, right? Instead of thinking properly to find solutions to get out of the rut, no, they drop their standards, they drop everything to fit that smaller box that they're being forced into, right? And so, but at some point, that box is going to become too small for even the most stubborn, laziest, most resilient human being. They're going to ask better questions, right? But by then, I don't know if they are able to get to the solution that is available to them, right? Which is freedom money, essentially what Bitcoin is. So those that understand this now are not susceptible to the same psyops that we hear about out in the world, which is why, here at the Bitcoin Way, we try really to push hard that education, that understanding of Bitcoin for everyone that comes to us. It is not an investment. As long as you're still getting upset or excited because of that fiat price, you don't fully grasp what it is that you're dealing with. The volatility that's out there, first of all, for the most part, is not organic. It's man-made, right? It's designed on purpose by a system that is, on borrowed time. They're trying to contain the threat. And so they have resources at their disposal to create all sorts of illusions about Bitcoin, which is what we're seeing now, the ups, the downs, the lefts, the rights. And they do this by trying to fit Bitcoin into their own TradFi world, right? So why do we have the ETFs? Why do we have the Bitcoin treasuries? Why do we have all these services, borrow against your Bitcoin? What are these? All of these, first of all, none of them are Bitcoin, and they're all counterparty risk, right? So the narrative is that, okay, Bitcoin's, the new kid on the block, cool, but use it this way. Because really, if you do, nothing changes for you. You're still dependent on us. We still have you by the balls, and we can still manipulate everything we want about you. Right? So, and most people are still stuck in that narrative because they don't do the work, they don't read the right books, they don't ask the right questions, and they just complain when they lose money. Right? So this is why I see a lot of people still stuck. I mean, they are their own worst enemies, because I am living proof that you can exit that system. You don't have to play on that chessboard. And believe me, I'm not unique. There are millions like me around the world that have finally understood this. The difference between us and a lot of people out there is that we have been completely destroyed, morally, spiritually, financially, you name it. And so when you are, eradicated to your DNA level, and you survive, the only way is up. But that human being that is reborn from that death is no longer the same. You can no longer control someone who understands what I'm telling you, because they will see your games. They know who you are. They know how you play, and they have 100 million workarounds around you. Legally, I'm not talking about anything, retarded here. And because of the existence of a tool like Bitcoin, that power is available to 8.3 billion people, which is something the legacy system fights really hard to prevent, because they are petrified that enough people get this, because then their entire existence dies in 5 minutes, right? And I've said this on many podcasts. If the fiat money that you're using was such a good product, why do you have to be threatened to use it? Exactly. Why are you being overtaxed when you use it, right? Why is it being debased? Like, tell me one good thing about that worthless piece of toilet paper that you're earning. Name one.
Yeah. I love this. I mean, so many directions we can go to, but maybe to hook into what you said at the ending. I always use this in a sentence, right? It's it's a currency. It's not even a money because it's losing value all the time, so you cannot save in it, right? It's a currency. I think Luke Broyles calls it a political currency that you're forced to use, right? And that is what you are referring to. And I like the tax part, actually, right? If we all think this is a good currency, or money, because we think a currency is the same as money. If this is so good, why does it need to be constantly taxed? Why does the value change constantly? Why do you have to create more constantly, right? And I think the core word that helped me look at that is just the word nominally, right? They always say that, well, if you have 2% inflation, or rather, monetary debasement and thus inflation of prices, people are motivated to spend these money units. And then we have, air quotes, growth, right? Growth on paper, we can say plus XYZ%, yay, like our economy grows. And I think there's a few of these things that are kind of basic, I would say, but that when you put them together, you can kind of start seeing that you like I'm operating in a system where I have no clue how it works, but it's sort of working for me. So I'll just keep continuing acting in it, basically. But by having that ignorance, because it's working enough, right? Enough, whatever enough is, right? It's working enough for me. I'm not really asking those uncomfortable questions because, like you mentioned, they are quite superficial questions, right? Why isn't there a competition of money? Why isn't there a free market of money, right? Why can't people pay in Bitcoin or silver or gold or whatever? Like, they could do that individually with each other, when we meet and I say, give you Bitcoin and you make me a sandwich or whatever. Like, we can do that, right? But it's not at a big enough scale because, one, I think we can never force that adoption as medium of exchange, right? That is an organic understanding of using a better money than a certain fiat money. And you see that people do that, for example, on the border of Canada and America, there's people in Canadian stores you can buy with American dollars. They give you Canadian dollars back because they know that, the US dollar is a stronger currency. So people have that behavior, but sorry for the long rant. But when you are active in a fiat money system and it's just working, it just works, right? You give the coins or the bills away and someone gives you a bread or whatever. You're like, okay, well, apparently it works. There's no need to think about what the predatory aspect of that is, right? And one of the things that you talk about when you talk about inflation, right? Many people see that as, it's just a boring metric, goes up and down. Christine Lagarde says, we want 2%, or, whatever the TV says. You call it theft with a fancy name. Now, I remember when I came into Bitcoin and more into podcasting, when I heard, inflation is theft, I felt like, ooh, that's kind of that's a rough expression. Now I think that is true. Why is it so clear to you that, this current money system is actually like it's a global web of financial oppression, right? You cannot really get out. It's like there's like something over us that kind of it forces us to use it, pay taxes, exchange our time and energy, etc. Why is that so clear to you, and what do you think other people aren't seeing?
Because you've been brainwashed to believe that this is how everything should be, right? Since day one, the schools teach you that. They follow the rules. These are the rules. The money must be government issued. The money must go in a bank. Like, you're told this since day one. You hear it from your parents. They heard it from their parents. And this lie has been going on for a very, very long time. So to expect an overnight change with something as revolutionary as Bitcoin, like, I wish it would happen, but I think it's, unrealistic to expect it, simply, again, because most people live in fear, right? Like, you tell them about something as amazing as Bitcoin, and the first thought that goes to their head, holy shit, is this legal? Like, am I going to go to jail, for even talking about this? Like, that's how retarded most people's brains are when it comes to, thinking outside the box. And until they have no choice but to take this option seriously, I think most people will continue being NPCs, and they'll continue seeing their lives worsen until, it becomes too much. And then they're like, all right, well, get me out of here. But the thing is, there's a lot of folks today that are not willing to go through the pain to learn. They are listening to the right messaging, they are reading the right books, and they are asking the right questions. But more importantly, they are taking action, right? So Bitcoin, the first thing we teach folks here is that to win at Bitcoin, you have got to believe with 100% conviction that this is money, real money. You cannot come to this thinking of it as an investment, which is what most spoiled people in the West are doing, right? You hear a lot of arguments. Oh, it has to start as a store of value. Oh, it has to be this, it has to be that. The number go up is critical for mass adoption. Maybe, okay? But if it is, it's because most people understand nothing and they just get excited by seeing something cool happen on screen and they run into it. But this is not the foundation of sustained success, because they're still going to get excited to sell that pristine asset for worthless rubbish later, right? So basically meaning that nothing has changed in their life. So step one is understanding that this is the money. And the way to win here is to start restructuring your life to save in that money, right? And of course, this is not a get-rich scheme. So you're not going to go from nothing to owning 17 Lambos by next Sunday. That you have to get out of your head. When you first start in Bitcoin, it's a very agonizing process, because unless you're sitting on millions of dollars to convert like this, from fake money to real money, you're going to have to work your way up the echelon in the same way you've been saving your entire lives. The difference is, for the first time ever, everything that you save is actually yours. Whereas in fiat, none of it is yours. A lot of people mistake or confuse having access to something with ownership. Just because the bank lets you use your money doesn't mean the money is yours. Just because your credit card or debit card still works doesn't mean the money is yours. That means that someone is still giving you permission to use it. But if one day that person wakes up on the wrong side of the bed or doesn't like your face for whatever reason and just scribbles a few new words on a piece of paper to change the rules, there goes your access. Poof, right? So that is the reality that most people have not tasted yet, but it's coming. It's absolutely coming. You can see it in Europe. You can see it in countries like Australia. You can see it in the UK. You can see it in Canada, and eventually it will be everywhere. And the biggest signal to me is just how bad the laws are becoming globally, right? More taxes, unrealized capital tax gains. What is that? For those that have never heard that word before. Unrealized capital. Okay, yeah, exactly. This translates into extortion. Mm-hmm. This is pure extortion, like thug style extortion. You don't pay, we're going to break your legs. There's no difference. The only difference is that now it's people hiding behind the title of government, but the result is the same, right? So how do they steal their money, your money? This is how they do it. And then what do they do on top of it? Now you have an exit tax. Why? Because they don't want you to leave, right? Because the more intelligent people pack up and go, the less revenue they can extract from them. All this Netherlands nightmare is coming to many other countries. I can tell you from now, these are the signs of a collapsing, failing system that is desperately hanging to any string it can in order to remain sustainable. But it will not work. It will not last because, again, of that new sheriff in town whose silver lining is its limited supply. That 21 million. That thing fucks up everything for the legacy system. They can't corrupt it. They can't manipulate it. They can't inflate it. They can't confiscate it if it's in your self-custody. Right? So they are completely helpless. Like they don't know what to do except level up the extremes of their tyranny in order to force you into their system. This is what I see happening. And the more people do nothing and think this is just some crazy guy talking on YouTube, well, your turn to experience some flavor of what I went through is 100% guaranteed.
For my European friends that want to buy Bitcoin with ease, check out Relay. I've been a longtime fan and happy to partner up with what I think is the best Bitcoin-only platform for Europeans. They offer a super simple, beginner-friendly app with no distractions and no shitcoins. You can do a quick one-time smash buy or set up automatic purchases when you're stacking regularly. And here's the thing that matters most. Relay is 100% self-custody. Every set you hold is yours. Your keys, your coins. If you want to get started, download the app via my link below or in the description and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, at checkout to get 10% off your fees. A huge shout out to Relay for sponsoring the show. Now let's continue. Your story was definitely a big help in painting a bigger picture for myself, right? We just mentioned that there, especially in the Western world, also obviously in other countries, but this is my reference point. There's a lot of high trust in other people that are, just as flawed as we are as humans, right? Everyone has an ego and their own life challenges and wants, wishes, desires, whatever, right? It's just so hard to visualize, conceptualize when you have not experienced it.
It's a very hard thing to solve, especially if your goal is to solve it quickly, because everybody learns and understands at their own pace, and the prerequisite for that is for them to be open to understanding all of this, right? But the best way that we found to do it is, well, there's many ways. Essentially, you're going to become a broken record, very, very quickly, repeating the same messaging over and over. And at some point, people's life situations is going to resonate with like the 50th time that you've repeated the same message, and then it's going to click for them, right? Or someone's going to experience something and they're like, ah, shit, I heard this, I should have listened, then they're going to do it. Otherwise, it depends really on how much influence you have on your surroundings. Like, for example, the people closest to me, they're forbidden from working and earning in fiat. It's just, Tony's rule. If you're going to go out and provide value into this world, you're not going to do it to fund a criminal or a criminal cartel. I will not allow you to do this. And and that is, backed up by a lot of education. Like, it's a tough process by someone who wants to make someone else who understands nothing yet really, like if I can telepathically take everything in my head and port it over in 10 seconds to somebody else's brain,
yeah,
you'd see Bitcoin's fiat price at like 10 trillion tomorrow, right? But doesn't work that way, at least not yet. Maybe one day we'll be able to do this, but as of this conversation, it's a long process. The other very useful way of doing it is to live the life you want them to see. Lead by example, which is something that we're doing. I'll be very candid with you. When I first decided to, first of all, to get back up on my feet and to rebuild my life, that decision was only made because I found Bitcoin. Otherwise, I was in such a dark place. There was no hope in hell for me just to even bother, to even get out of bed. It was like, that's how bad it was. And then when I ran across this Andreas Antonopoulos video, I don't know, maybe it was sent from someone who from above, dropped that video my way. I don't know, but something changed, something clicked for me. And then life started to flow back through my veins. And I promised myself, I'm like, look, if you're going to get back up on your feet, you're going to do it the right way, even if it's going to take you much longer to do so, even if the initial road is going to be very difficult, it will be worth it in the end. And so I stuck to that conviction, and let me tell you, I am living proof that it's 100% worth it, because you start saving in real money. That money appreciates over time. That appreciation increases your purchasing power. And when you get to a certain point, external macro factors don't bother you. They don't matter, right? Like if everybody just ignored Bitcoin today and nobody wanted to use it for the next forever, then Bitcoin would die simply because there's no interest. But this is not what's happening in the world. In fact, it's the complete opposite. But if you're listening to their narratives, or if you're glued to the charts, or you're listening to macro and micro fucking rubbish all day long, you're not going to see that reality. There are millions of folks around the globe that are living on a Bitcoin standard. They are not driving Lambos. They are not buying Ferraris, okay? But they are living very happy, very comfortable, sovereign lives with no connections to the evil empire anymore. There's no big bad wolf behind your back breathing over your neck, right? There's no fear of waking up one morning to the news of extortion, unrealized capital gains tax, 60% tax bill, and whatever other, nonsense that keeps coming up, on a regular basis. Digital ID to use a search engine, central bank digital currencies, all of that nightmare. That only exists if you stay within that world. But again, as of 2009, 8.3 billion people have the option to leave that world. But in order to leave that world, you need to understand how to live in the new world. Understand Bitcoin is money, learn how to use it, and memorize 2 words: self-custody. That's it, right? And once that clicks in your head and you go through the workout of building your savings on sound money, you will reach a point where, again, external factors don't impact your everyday life. I am living proof of it. And again, it's not like because I'm sitting on hundreds or thousands of coins, far, far from it. But when you understand that your life now belongs to you, because when you own your money, no one controls you, right? So once that clicks, you live on your own terms. But again, that ties into another, rabbit hole, which is the jurisdictional freedom, which we can discuss later on if you want to. But step 1 really is about owning your money. Once that's done, everything else becomes easier.
Yeah. Yeah, you echo something that I also frequently mention. I don't think it's about how much Bitcoin you have, right? I think, well, the more Bitcoin you have, the nicer in general, right? Like just you can own your time even more. But just getting to the point where you are consciously making the decision to actually keep your own money and take all that responsibility, making that conscious decision. I think my assumption would be like 8 or 9 out of 10 people will then also realize, hey, what are all these other parts in my life where I haven't really taken a conscious decision, but I'm still following certain, systems or, ways of doing so because other people are also doing them, not realizing that the other people also haven't really thought about why all the other people are doing it, basically, right? So just getting to that point where you kind of like peel away all these layers of abstraction that you accepted and now are refuting, I think is already quite a psychological and also spiritual step in becoming more sovereign. And you just mentioned macro, right? We can talk about why do you need Bitcoin? The debasement of the money, fiat money, etc. But you've argued that is not really enough. You also have to understand the protocol, and I think you just mentioned a few times, right? Like, okay, Bitcoin is kind of the antithesis, right, to fiat money. What is the essence for you there? Is that the hard cap, right? Like why is this not a stock investment as a lot of people think it is, right? Oh, it's trending with the Nasdaq, etc. What is it that they need to understand of the protocol that for you is the thing that gives you power once you hold it?
Well, the thing is, look, part of the attacks on Bitcoin is, the attempts to rebrand it, which is why, when they try to fit Bitcoin into the TradFi world, well, the first thing that's the easiest path to do so is to rebrand it as a stock or as an investment. And so, of course, once you do that, then it falls within that, manipulated chessboard but can be easily be taken up and down. Like, how do you go from 126 to 66 in such a quick period of time? Like, you think that was organic? Absolutely not. And so when you control these variables, well, then, you also control people's perception of the product, like in this case, Bitcoin itself. When you're saving in whatever local currency, do you compare it to any other currency? Like, I don't know, I guess you're in Europe, right? Like when you earn euros, do you compare it against, okay, wherever? All right, let's say I'll use the US dollar because most people, reference that. So when somebody earns in the US dollar, when you get your paycheck, do you compare it to the Zimbabwean currency or the Lebanese pound or the Iranian rial? Of course not. Why do you do it with Bitcoin? But if we rebranded the US dollar as another tech stock, that's exactly what people would do. And so you can also screw around with the numbers and people would say, the US dollar, wow, terrible product, right? So this is what they're trying to do to Bitcoin. Keep it as keep it as a counterparty risk, as an investment, as a store of value. If that's all it was, Bitcoin would fail, man. Because it will get co-opted and centralized, at some point, and there's no more revolution. The revolution is in these two words, self-custody. The first time where people can own their time and energy, their money. That's the part that the legacy system will go to any length to prevent enough people from understanding, because, that's where the power lies, right? But it's not working because, unfortunately, whatever other inefficiencies they're doing are forcing people to learn about self-custody because their own life situations are getting, drastically worse. I keep referring to the example of people that live in very high tax jurisdictions. Like, just do simple math. If your tax rate, just to keep the numbers easy, is at 50%, right? So you're working and you're paying 50%. Then on that 50%, you have the debasement tax, your inflation, your money's worth less. Let's say, again, to be conservative, like 10%. Then you have all these other indirect taxes, sales tax, school tax, bullshit tax, whatever tax, right? What is left from your paycheck after you've deducted all of these things? Pretty much nothing, right? So I'd say good maybe 70%, if I'm being nice here, goes to fund these parasites. So in other words, you, the hardworking, honest individual who believes, by playing by the rules and wants to be the good citizen, are essentially working 7 to 8 months out of the year for free. And then you wonder why your life is so difficult, why you can't afford the things that you used to afford, why there's just not enough time in the day. No matter how hard you try, you're still stuck, right? If people simply just paused 5 minutes during the day and asked themselves, really ask themselves that question, what am I doing? It says more about you, right? It's allowing yourself to be bullied by the system, which is exactly how I see this. And a bully is never going to stop bullying unless you end it. Because bullies, they thrive on weakness. And so as long as you're weak, the abuse will continue. It's like any abusive relationship. You can cry, you can complain, you think you're gonna get sympathy from the bully. You won't. You will get them even more excited to take it one notch higher, which is again what we're starting to see more and more now. So if you want to end the bullying, exit that abusive relationship, that deadly drug addiction, you have got to do the work and pull yourself out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's. I just looked up the number in the US. People work 1 day a week to pay taxes only to help their government pay interest on the debt,
which they can't do.
Exactly. Yeah, but then people say, you know, when you start this conversation with someone, people say, well, you have to pay taxes because they have to build roads and this and that. Well, yeah, you know, conceptually, you can agree, but factually, when you look at what the money is spent on, and especially if you start going down the road of, well, how much of my total income basically is spent on taxes, or well, yeah, goes to taxes, and what is that being spent on? For example, in the US, it only goes to paying it off. Well, to paying interest. It doesn't go to paying it off, right? If the debt needs to be refinanced, like this year, a lot, and the interest rates are way higher than before, that percentage is only going up. There are no new roads. There are no new bridges. There isn't improvement in whatever reading level of 5-year-olds, and you know, all that stuff is not getting any money. Basically, you're working to pay off this debt, right? And I think that is what also eventually incentivizes all these stricter attempts at getting more money from citizens, because there's no one ever really that gets serious traction. Maybe that's also a signal, right? That says, well, maybe we should reconsider what we are doing, right? Think about Ron Paul, or any type of libertarian type person in any Western country. I'd say you know, people don't want to, and I think that goes back to our beginning. They don't want to accept that they're functioning or are being the subject in a fundamentally flawed system, right? So even when someone has this picture perfect factual representation of how money works and what the I would say the mathematically determined end of this system is, people are still going to be like, yeah, you know, like please don't put that on my plate to think about. Now, I wanted to ask you about this. This is a long road, right? I think this is a really long road. And you just mentioned, you know, people call Bitcoin digital gold. I always say, well, digital gold is just an illustration to help people think in a certain direction when you can think about Bitcoin. But it is characteristically way more than gold. It is vastly superior to gold, right? Some people say exponential gold, you know, perfect money, you know, whatever. But my point is more, it's obvious that this is still evolving, just the understanding, the reflection, the discussion, all these things. And it's going to take a very long time, I think, for enough, air quotes, I don't know what enough people are, to figure out what you just said. You need to take away energy from that system that is abusing you, basically, that you're putting energy and time in and not really getting anything in return. You're perceptually getting something similar as you had before, but it's only worse, right? I'm in my late 30s. When I think about 20 years ago, I don't think we progressed. I still have an amazing life, but compared to 20 years ago, I think it changed in a negative way. And that is also a very, very slow process, right? And I think these two things kind of crossing paths at one point, I think it'll take some time. I think that could possibly be an inflection point, but a lot of people want stuff to happen quickly. They don't understand this bigger arc. Let's say we get there. What does that look like when people actually value Bitcoin? They save in Bitcoin, they spend Bitcoin. Is a Bitcoin standard something that takes us more into the future, or does it resemble something from the past? What do you think that could look like? And maybe what is the total opposite of it if we don't?
The thing is, we are already living on a Bitcoin standard, at least for those that understand Bitcoin as money. I genuinely believe that we are going to head more and more towards a two-tiered world. One that is founded on sound money, where people are really just living their lives, you know, their own ways, no headaches, no fuss, no anxiety. And you've got another part that is completely stuck in a dystopian nightmare. And these two worlds will coexist for a while. But of course, as with human nature, people always look at where the grass is greener, right? And then they're going to wonder, well, hold on a second. How are these people not complaining and laughing and smiling and doing stuff? And my life, like I want to jump off a cliff. It's so bad, right? And so they're going to start asking these questions. And at one point, they're going to want to move from point very bad to point very good. But by then, there's no ticket. Like there's no train to take you from that shithole to that greener grass area, because who's going to trade their freedom for that? So either there's no ticket or that ticket is ridiculously expensive. And so when people are stuck enough, then they revolt. That scenario is what worries me, because I've seen a version of it in Lebanon. Believe me, this is not a movie you want to watch. Okay, so, and this was isolated to a small country. Put that on a global scale, where people everywhere are having their Lebanon moments, feeling suffocated. They need answers. That is extremely dangerous and extremely, very ugly to even conceive what that could possibly look like. I think eventually a lot of folks will come into Bitcoin that way, because that's the only option that's going to be available to them. But it's going to take time, like you said. Maybe not as long as most people think, because again, pain is the best teacher. And as your situation gets worse, at least intelligent folks are going to start asking quicker questions. All right, this is not working for me. What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we're starting to see this more, by the way, even despite everything that's going on in the macro world, Bitcoin's price dipping and all that stuff. We are seeing an increase of interest from people for self-custody, jurisdictional freedom, and what have you. It's not the other way around, right? But again, this is limited to those that are actually paying attention.
Yeah, I would agree. I also think this is why it's slow, right? It is a one-by-one conversion, where fiat money is probably a multi-layered group enchantment from when you're like 6 years old or something. So maybe that is why it takes so long. Yeah.
The thing is, here's something else maybe a lot of folks are not paying attention to. Because Bitcoin is such a permissionless monetary system, it's for everyone, right? The wrong people, the worst people, the people you least want to be anywhere near Bitcoin are 100% in it, because they understand it. They just don't want you, the worthless pleb, to be in it. So the powers that be want Bitcoin in self-custody for themselves, but they want you, the worthless cattle, to use Bitcoin, but in a way that keeps you dependent on them. The treasuries, the ETFs, borrowing against your Bitcoin, all these carrots that they dangle to keep you within that broken system. That mindset has to die. You have to forget about that world entirely, or use it strictly when you need it, and then never look back.
Yep.
So some people argue, oh, but I need money. No, you don't. If you can't afford something, don't buy it. Focus on your immediate needs. This isn't about living a life of luxury in 2 days. This is about building the foundation to give you that life at some point, with the main difference being that no one can take it away from you anymore. That is the investment in Bitcoin. It's your freedom. It's not a yield. It's not an interest rate that you get paid. That mindset has to die before you can actually win and move forward in Bitcoin, which is why we never recommend any, but I mean like not a single one, TradFi service using Bitcoin wrappers, because they are all manipulated services. Even if the intention of the people behind them is noble, these people are playing by rules that they don't control. And the people making these rules, these people are not noble. These people don't care about anybody except for their own relevancy.
Yeah.
You can only trust government when government is no longer in a position to be abusive. And that only happens when you strip them from the power of money. so that a government is held accountable just like any other business, just like you, me, and everybody
Any
else. You do
person, yeah.
something wrong, you do something wrong, you pay for it, right? But when you've got a carte blanche to do whatever the hell you want, no questions asked, and a money printer, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So that illusion of good government cannot exist in a world like this.
What is your hottest take on what the Western version of this Lebanese bank line and your experience is going to look like in the West in the next decade? Because I assume that, you know, the history of Lebanon is a bit more fragile and chaotic than a lot of the Western world. So, you know, perhaps you already had a different, you know, point of view of government, etc. But I think, especially in the Western world where the trust is so high, it's really going to melt brains, in my opinion. What do you think?
Well, look, one thing I learned is that as bad as the corruption was in Lebanon, these people were not autonomous. You know, there's a hierarchy for the corruption. The Lebanese governments, these corrupt politicians, they also report to a higher level of corruption. And if you want to go down that rabbit hole, well, then this is why I'm telling you that the collapse is coming everywhere. Because the mechanics of the Lebanon collapse, the Iran collapse, they're all the same. They're all tied to the same broken system initially, right? They're just different tentacles in different parts of the world. So smaller countries will fall first, bigger countries will fall last, but eventually, things will deteriorate. If 5% of what happened after the collapse in Lebanon happens, let's say, in the United States, God help us. Because, first of all, in Lebanon, there is no 500 million privately owned assault weapons, which is a constitutional right in the United States. A lot of people have guns, right? So you remove these people's bank accounts, or maybe you keep the bank accounts, but their purchasing power is pretty much formatted, can't buy shit. These guys need to live. What's the next reaction? Like, do you think they're going to come and have a conversation over a cup of coffee or like a nice dinner to try to work things out? No. It's going to be act and then think later, which is what I've seen. That scenario is not it's not something you want to be caught in the middle of. And you can't blame these people. Like, it's not because these people are all of a sudden criminals or terrorists. No. They're resorting to survival instinct. And the thing is, no one really knows what they're capable of, like not even you, until you're put in that situation. Like, you want to know who Bram is, really is? There's no meditation in the world that you can do for a long enough period that'll give you that answer as quick as putting you in my shoes in Lebanon the day after the whole country collapsed. Because now you really have zero option. You are formatted. You are like this lone person in the middle of a desert. No one around you. Figure it out. So what do? This is how you figure out who you are and what you're capable of, and how you rise back from literal hell. And so people were reacting based on their own version of those instincts, right? Some people didn't make it. Some people made it. Some people, I don't know where they are. But overall, it is, and again, it's not about doom and gloom. It's about just sharing a reality that I've personally experienced and worked my way, a very difficult way, to come out of it. So if I can do it, others can do it as well. My purpose here is to avoid as many folks as possible to have to go through something like this in order to understand what I'm trying to explain here, right? Because I don't know, man, like, I never thought I'd be alive during a time like this to actually see something as historic unfolding before us. In 100 years, they'll be studying this time of history. And I can only assume what they'd be thinking, man. We joke around internally a lot that, like a student studying us would probably laugh at us. Like, look at these idiots. They're working for paper money and giving it to someone who then decides if they can use it, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
can you just imagine the conversation like 100, 200 years from now when Bitcoin is just like a standard sound money, everybody's living that life, and then somebody decides to go back in time and just study, you know, how the money evolved into Bitcoin, and then they'll read about us. So, you know, like, if you want to laugh, just think about that conversation and take yourself out of the joke, right? by moving into that future from now. So the way anyone can do it is slowly. Unless you're sitting again on hundreds of millions of dollars, you can decide what percentage you want to start allocating to sound money. We don't give financial advice. Everybody does it at their own pace, based on their own comfort level. But to do nothing, in my opinion, is suicide. Because at some point, even if you had a lot of that, you know, fake paper, you won't be able to do much with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So understand Bitcoin is money, sound money that appreciates in purchasing power over time. And the investment that you're making is in yourself, in your freedom, in the fact that you don't need permission to transact from point A to point B anymore. Those days are gone. Trusting a third party with your money will be at some point in time considered mental illness. Like, you have to be a nut job to hand over your keys, your money to someone else, and then pray that they don't abuse that position.
That is probably a great ender to this conversation, but is there anything that you would want to share with our audience as a final takeaway or call to action?
Absolutely. Guys, there are millions of folks living on a Bitcoin standard today. Don't let the news, the narratives, the charts keep you away from the real truth, the real signal. Bitcoin is a protocol. You know, like the internet, there are tons of apps and systems and layer 2s and 3s being built in that world. There are many high-profile merchants across the world that are starting to accept it as money and are seeing their sales significantly improve while using Bitcoin as money. That world is thriving. But if you're only focused on the charts, you are missing where the truth is. Plenty of people around the globe live as free individuals, true sovereign individuals, right? Tax-free, low tax, better incentives jurisdictions. They exist. We help people get there. Bitcoin has money. You can do it. Again, it's not a get-rich scheme. It's a savings technology. So figure out your formula and how to build those savings. You don't need to buy one Bitcoin from day one. When the price dips, I can assure you that everyone who understands this message is ecstatic. And everybody who is fearful is because they are still lacking the fundamentals of what it is that they're looking at. The future is orange. I genuinely believe, and I've said it a million times and I will continue to repeat it, Bitcoin will become the future world reserve currency and the future of money, simply because it's the only neutral asset that everyone will agree that they can trust.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that is an even better ender. So I want to thank you for your time and your insights. And I hope our listeners found it valuable. And yeah, man, thanks. And I'll see you soon in a few months.
Thank you, Bram. Looking forward to it, man. Thank you.
Cheers, brother. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, if you want to help me shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, please like this video and subscribe to stay connected. I hope to see you for our next episode. Bye.